Good morning. Happy Friday. Friday. Another crazy week of weather. I don't know what it's doing there, but it's getting ready to rain here. Cloudy and cold after being so nice. And pretty. Alrighty. If you haven't done the activity, a lot of people have. But several of you still have not completed this activity. So let's take the first few minutes to work on this. It is due today. If you have already done it, Uh, please just read over the lessons in Canvas while we wait for everybody to come in. And so I'm gonna give you about 10 minutes for you to work on those two questions. And then again, if you have already completed that assignment, read this section in Canvas. Ten minutes while we wait for folks to log in. Still have quite a few people not logged in yet. I appreciate those of you who are on time. Appreciate those of you who do your assignment when it's given. All right, good morning, good morning. If you just came in, we are finishing up the assignment. Like most of you have still not completed the assignment. It is in Canvas. So I'll give you a few minutes to work on that, get that turned in. And then when you finish that, please read this section on here, collection. We are going to watch the second video in a little while. If you finish reading that, because there's no activity to do with that, finish reading that, go on and read this section on fibers. This section does have an activity for you to do, and it actually works. Some of these activities are not working. All right, so give go ahead and read the two sections. All right, so again, giving time for everybody to get this assignment done. If you've done it, please read the units in Canvas while you're waiting. This is due today. All right, good morning, good morning, good morning. If you just came in, if you haven't completed this assignment, complete it. If you have completed it, please read the sections in Canvas while we wait. Giving everybody a few minutes to get caught up before we move on. All right, I'm going to stop sharing for a minute. Most of you are here, still waiting for a few more people. Again, this assignment is late after today, so please make sure you use class time to get class work done. I know it's early in the morning. Some of y'all log in and then go back to sleep. Let's try not to do that. I'll make this a successful year. We're going to stay on task. Everybody who's planning on being on time is here. So I'm going to do attendance and then we will look at the first of two. I have a lab video for you to look at. Ideally, if we were in the classroom, we would have samples and we would look at them under the microscope. But we have to come up with a different alternative. It's too long. Okay. All right. So if you haven't finished the assignment, finish that on your time. Finish it soon. Watch the second video, and then we're actually going to watch two. We're going to watch this one, which is the second one to what she did, and then we're going to watch a lab one.
Students, we are continuing on with our hair analysis lesson. This is lesson 2 over this topic. So if you've missed lesson 1, make sure that you go back and watch that video or listen to the video before you jump into this lesson. So I want to do a quick recap over what we discussed in lesson 1 with regards to hair. Now, when we're talking about hair and its applications to forensics, you need to know that hair can be considered class evidence or individual evidence, depending on how it's found at the crime scene. So if the hair is found with the follicle, that's the root, that's the portion of the hair that contains DNA, then we say it is individual evidence because we can narrow down the suspect field to one individual person. However, if we find hair at a crime scene and it contains no follicle and we can't get DNA from it, then we have class evidence. So the only way it's helpful at that point is if we use macroscopic and microscopic properties to sort of help us narrow down our suspect field. So let's talk about the follicle. The follicle is the root portion of the hair that contains the nuclear DNA. Okay, so that's the part that we hope to have if we're an investigator and we find a hair sample at the crime scene. But that's not always the case. So it's important to understand some other characteristics about hair that we can use to match a suspect sample to a crime scene evidence sample. So the other part of the hair, there's 2 parts to the hair. So we have the follicle and the shaft. The shaft actually consists of 3 different layers. So we have the cuticle, the cortex, and the medulla. You can see on the image here, the medulla is the very inside core part of the hair. Then we have the cortex, which is the inside portion. That's the part that contains the coloring or the pigment of the hair. And then we have the cuticle, which sort of protects the medulla and the cortex, and it contains the scales, sort of a protective layer of the hair. We also talked about macroscopic and microscopic properties. So remember, macro Macroscopic properties are properties and characteristics that we can see without the need of a microscope. And then microscopic properties are going to require a microscope to see. So some examples of macroscopic properties with regards to hair would be like color, texture, length, and then microscopic properties would be things like the medulla pattern or the condition of the hair's cuticle, or something that we're going to talk about a little later in today's lesson, the medullary index.
¿Por qué debería aprender inglés con ICT?
A pesar de que estamos en un país multicultural y multilingüe, aprender el
We also talked about the 4 different medulla patterns that are possible in a human sample of hair. And today we're going to focus more on the medulla and how it can be used to match suspect hair samples to evidence samples. We're also going to talk about some other characteristics and properties of hair. So to get started, you need to know that human hairs, can vary from region to region on the body, even from the same person. So your head hair is not the same as your eyebrow hair, which is not the same as your underarm hair. So we have variations depending on where the hair is derived from. Hairs can also differ between humans and animals. We're going to look at that today, and then from human to human. So hairs can originate from the head, the eyebrows or eyelashes. Those are kind of classified together. You can have beard hair, pubic hair, body hair, underarm hair, and each of these hairs have their own characteristics. Again, hairs can vary from one source to another, and you can see that on these graphs. So for example, different ethnic groups are going to have unique characteristics to that group. Again, you can see it on the graph. So you can see the different characteristics that are associated with different ancestral groups like European, Asian, African groups. And you can see how the hair samples look different under different types of microscopes. You can also see like the difference in the average strand count, the texture, the general texture of the hair. You also need to know that animal hair looks very different than human hair and has some differences there. So they differ in pigmentation, medullary index, which again we'll come back and talk about, and then cuticle type. And you can see in this visual image the differences between human hair and then other animal hairs. So specifically, I like this graph because it shows a comparison between human hair and animal hair. So starting with pigment or the color of the hair. So with human hair, the color and pigmentation is constant throughout the hair shaft. Now that is not always the case. So I think about women who dye their hair, or guys who dye their hair. If you go a long time without doing that, you might have some abrupt color changes like that of animal hair. But for the most part, naturally, the color and pigmentation is pretty constant throughout the hair shaft with some exceptions. Now, the medulla for human hair is relatively thin as compared to animal hair. Animal hair is very wide when we're talking about the medulla. Human hair, the medulla makes up 1/3 of the hair shaft. So that number is going to be important in some future things that we're going to talk about and do. So just make sure that you note that. And there will be another slide that has that information on it. Animal hair, the medulla is very well defined. Now, scale structure. Human hair has overlapping scales, whereas animal hairs can have overlapping scales, but they can also have different. I'll go back and it's easier to look at a visual image. So you can have differences in the structure of your different animal hairs.
Darrow's family uses Gain detergent now, so their laundry smells more amazing than ever.
Isn't that the dog's towel?
Hey, me towel, Sue towel. Order Gain online for fresh scents delivered to your door.
I'm determined for us to see this
We
one.
tried everything, but Charlie still struggled with math. Then another mom recommended.
Sorry about that.
All right, so let's talk about medullary index. This is where we get into some math, which I know you're going to love. But the ratio of the diameter of the medulla to the diameter of the entire hair is known as the medullary index. And so we can actually calculate this number. It's a numerical calculation that can be derived from a hair sample. And so we have a formula, and you'll need to make sure that you write this down. So to get the medullary index,
pause
you're
it
going to
there
take
so you can write that down. I do believe it's in your Canvas notes, but write it down just in case. Because this is how you tell the difference between human and other fibers. So do just make a side note of this somewhere. The formula.
width of the medulla, which on worksheets and samples I will give you, and you're going to divide that by the diameter of the hair, and that's going to give you a number, and then you're going to use that number to make some calculations, some matches, and gather some information about the hair itself. So this is important to note. If the medullary index is 0.5 or greater, then the hair most likely is from an animal hair. Okay, so if the medullary index is 0.5 or greater, the hair probably came from an animal. If the medullary index is 0.33 or less, then the hair is most likely from a human, came from a human hair. And so we're going to use that. That's just some extra information that you may need. Now, I always get the question, what if the medullary index is between 0.33 and 0.5? Well, in that case, you can't really tell. So you can just use your best judgment on that. All right, let's work one out together using this formula. So make sure you have the formula written down. Width of the medulla divided by diameter of the hair. All right, so suppose the sample of hair has a diameter of 110 microns and has a medulla that measures 58 microns. If you're going to calculate the medullary index of the hair, you're going to have to remember divide the width of the medulla by the diameter of the hair sample. So 58 divided by 110. If you
I'm gonna pause it there to give you a minute to try to work that out. Somebody put when you figured it out, put an answer in the chat. Then the second thing you have to do is decide, is it human or is it animal? I only see a handful of people that look like they're trying to work it out. Again, work it out and then put an answer in the chat. Some of y'all waiting for somebody else to do it. Practice makes perfect. All right, so we're trying to calculate the medullary index, which is the MI. And units are microns. The formula was the width of the medulla divided by the the diameter of the medulla, of the hair, sorry. Anybody? Figure that out, chat? All right, thank you, Van. Thank you, Hill. All right, not human. All right, let's see what she says.
calculate that, you would get 0.53. Now, if I'm comparing this hair sample to maybe a suspect hair sample, that might be important.
And
The
Kamara,
medullary index
YouTube?
might be important in making that comparison. It certainly wouldn't hurt to have that information. If I was trying to distinguish between a human hair and an animal hair, I can use the information that I had on a couple screens back. Okay, here it is. So if the medullary index is greater than 0.5, then we have animal hair. So I'm going to go back. We have a medullary index greater than 0.5, so more than likely this specific hair is from an animal.
Swiffer Mop Deluxe. With a locking head, getting into tight spaces is simple.
Usually have that many commercials.
There is no
She got a big
limitation.
bill.
We won't challenge completely.
All right, so let's talk about hair itself. Hair is incredibly strong. The reason for that is the protein that makes up hair, which we call keratin. If you'll remember from biology, keratin is a chain of amino acids that forms a helix or a spiral. And when it is connected with the amino acids, it creates a really strong bond. So because of this bond, hair is resistant to decomposition. And this can be extremely useful for forensic investigators because they can still collect hair from the deceased, even if they have been deceased for a long period of time. So forensic lab analysts can use different methods for analyzing hair. We mentioned this, how they collect hair in a previous lesson, but remember, hair is collected by plucking, shaking, scraping different surfaces. Investigators can also use adhesives to collect hairs from victims or other objects. And then the hair can be analyzed using a microscope. We can get those microscopic properties. And then sometimes chemical testing can be used to analyze hair. So the best microscope to use is an electron microscope because it can create very detailed images. So an electron microscope can magnify a hair sample up to 50,000 times its original size, which is super enlarged and can really provide some great characteristics and properties of hair. If you have some time and you want to research the Casey Anthony case, you can just search on YouTube, Casey Anthony hair, and you can go back and watch. In that case, the court proceedings were recorded, and you can watch the hair experts or the hair analyst who worked on that case. And it's very interesting to listen to their take on the evidence that was found in that case. All right, so anything that we ingest or absorb through our skin can then become part of our hair, which is super important in forensics because hair doesn't readily decompose. That means that investigators can test hair samples to establish a timeline of a suspect or a victim's exposure to different toxins and drugs. A great example of this is the case of Napoleon Bonaparte, which if you're one of my students, we're going to do further research on. If you're not one of my students, I would highly recommend after this video just doing a little bit of research on Napoleon Bonaparte and sort of the debate behind his death. There's a lot of conspiracy theories out there, but it's very interesting how hair and something called neutron activation analysis was used to solve the mysterious death of this political leader. So I just mentioned neutron activation analysis, and you might have thought, what in the world is she talking about? So neutron activation analysis is a test. Basically, it is a chemical test that exposes hair to a beam of neutrons in a nuclear reactor. And the purpose of this is to determine the existence and quantities of different trace elements in a hair sample. So this test can actually provide links between hair evidence and the circumstances that may have surrounded the person's death or the hair itself. Neutron activation analysis was the nuclear test that was performed on Napoleon Bonaparte's hair. And helped sort of determine his death. So it was believed that he died of stomach cancer, although for years there was a lot of speculation that he was poisoned. And then in 1960, the neutron activation analysis test sort of authenticated that hairs that were collected after Napoleon's death contained trace amounts of arsenic. So they believe that he was poisoned via arsenic. All right, so that ends our hair lesson, and I will see you in the next lesson.
Okie dokie. All right. So there was one other one that I wanted to show you. It's Friday. Have a relaxed day. So the two things that you need to remember about this video. One was the neutron activation analysis. Whoops, let me stop this one. And come back over here. And again, and then in the medullary index. So make sure you made note of those two things. Okay. All right, so again, and then that video is in your files now. All right, so this one is more of a lab. It's actually taking you inside the lab.
Is that working? All right. Welcome, everyone. My name is Captain Catherine X1. We're streaming to you live today via secure channel to help solve the mystery of the missing shuttle. I hear that you have some experience in forensics. Normally on the lunar colony, I'm a scientist who drives the lunar rovers to the dark side of the moon and discovers craters where I take core samples and bring the samples back to my lab where they undergo surface analysis. But today we're going to use my lab and equipment to examine some of the trace evidence found at the scene of the crime. So what is trace evidence? Let's discuss. And helping me today, I have an assistant, Valkyrie. Come here, Valkyrie, say hi. Good girl. Good girl. She goes with me on those expeditions to the dark side of the moon, and we're going to talk a little bit about what trace evidence is today. Trace evidence is any small or microscopic material found at the scene of the crime that's often left behind. This can include things like hair or fibers, dirt, seeds, or that might be left behind. Usually it sticks to people and then rubs off on contact. For example, today, some little seed pods got stuck to my shoes. I don't know if you can see that. And under the microscope here, you can see why sometimes things that look small and innocuous actually attach themselves to us. This is one of the seed pods here, and you can see those hooks and barbs that attach to your clothing. That a criminal or just that they have on their person and then leave at the scene of the crime. Why is trace evidence so important? Well, for one thing, it doesn't just tell us who was at the crime, but it paints a picture for us of exactly what happened. It's hard to hide trace evidence, especially when it's very, very small. Even someone trying to cover their tracks and avoid leaving fingerprints might leave some other evidence behind. One of those pieces of trace evidence that we're going to look at today is fibers. Now there's many different types of fibers. We could have natural fibers from animals, things like fur or hair or wool or silk. Or fibers maybe from plants instead of animals, things like cotton or hemp, something like that. There's also synthetic fibers, man-made, that are often made from chemicals. These include nylon, polyester, etc. And we even have some manufactured fibers that are some combination of natural and synthetic. Let's look at a few of these in a second. And the first thing we're going to analyze about them is their physical characteristics. What do they look like? What size are they? The shape, the texture, the color. And I have a few that I've set up on our microscopes here. One thing that we can notice, different types of fibers. I have feathers here that maybe you can see. I think we're in front of the projector just a little bit there. Yeah. Okay, so as we focus in, you can see what a feather looks like. You notice the little hairs, and also this thick, dense line down the middle called a medulla. Some natural fibers later. This is a plant fiber. This is made from cotton. You can see here the strand has a lot of individual parts coming off. It's a little bit rough. And then I have a synthetic fiber down right here. Very little is coming off. Instead of strands flying off the end, we have a couple little neat bulbs here, and it's all very tight and compact together. All right. So you kind of have an idea of what we can look at with different fibers. Let me show you the trace evidence. And by the way, explorers, if you have any questions as we go along, feel free to ask them in the comments. We want to share as much of this information with you as we can to solve the crime. Okay. Getting closer. All right. Now what you can see on the screen here is a human hair. So you'll notice that it's very smooth and almost translucent. As I move it, you can see the underside of the slide through it. It's almost transparent. Now let's move to a non-human hair. Okay, bring that into focus a bit for you. And pay particular attention to this one right here. What you'll notice is we cannot see through the non-human hair. This must come from some type of animal, because the center has this dark striation called a medulla. So it has a darker core that's not present in human hair. Sort of explanation of trace evidence is we will upload some of the evidence found at the scene of the crime, and we want you to determine whether the culprit was perhaps human or non-human. Now, in addition to a physical analysis of our fibers, we can also do what's called a chemical analysis, because different fibers don't only look different, they're made of different things and react differently. Now, one of the common ways that we can analyze the chemical composition of a substance is through something called a burn test. Now, if you've ever smelt burnt hair, I think you can imagine that smell, how it's different than if it smells different than if you burn something like a piece of wood or a leaf, something that's going to smell a little more woody. So not only can we tell by the different sense of smell, but also whether it keeps burning after I remove it from the flame. Does it melt? Does it stop burning when we remove it from the flame? What does it smell like, and what residue does it leave? So I have a few samples here to show you how that works. Some hair. Okay. So we'll take one of these, using the pliers for safety. It's very fine. And then I have a flame here. Can you see that okay on the camera? All right, as I do this, you'll notice that it kind of shrinks away from the flame. It doesn't like to get close. And it has this terrible smell. It burns instead as soon as I remove it from the flame. Now, instead of a hair, I have a strand of cotton fiber. Now this cotton fiber, as I burn it, is going to react a little differently. You'll notice when I pulled it away from the flame, it continued to burn all the way down to the tongs, and that's why I use them instead of my fingers. And the smell that it's releasing is much more pleasant than the hair, I can assure you. Okay. And the residue it leaves on my hands is a little difficult to see, but it's something of a charcoaly substance. It's dark, instead of the gray ash that you might get with a different substance. And I have one more burn test for you guys. This is an artificial synthetic fiber. You'll notice it's much straighter. And as I burn it, catching on fire, it melts, and it releases quite a bit of smoke. It shrinks away from the flame, and it doesn't go all the way back to my tongs there. And the residue that it leaves is not dark in any way. It's kind of this waxy, plasticky substance. So when we examine trace evidence at the scene of the crime, we can kind of determine what was left. We might not be able to find an exact match, but wearing a fabric of this material, or they had this color hair, something like that. Evidence we found today at the scene of the crime, and we'll upload this for you, is we did find a human hair. We found some sort of non-human hair. You can tell by that middle core there. We found some sort of dense, thick fabric. And we found these particles here of regolith. Regolith is a type of moon dust particle, and it's very strange that we found that in our shuttle bay, because normally we have air filters running at all times to keep this fine particle away. It also possesses an electrical charge that can damage our equipment, so it's a very interesting find indeed. Let's see if we can look at some of that under the microscope really quickly. Do cleaning products alter fibers at all? Depending on the chemical composition of the cleaning product, yes. So for instance, when you wash your laundry, you might need to be careful if you're using bleach, because bleach, as you know, will stain your fabric different colors, so that can actually impact the fiber in a lot of different ways. Here we have some of the regolith, just so you can see it here. Quite a bit of it was found at the scene of the crime, which is quite interesting. Okay. And it looks like we have some other fiber here. Who knows what that could be? Is of Earth. Stay posted for our upcoming evidence that we are going to be sharing on your social platform. What we need you to do is analyze whether the evidence found at the scene of the crime matches a particular human individual, a non-human individual. We had some aliens as well, and some androids at the scene. And we need you to look at the fibers that were found and determine what kind of fabric was the culprit wearing. This will help us narrow down our suspects on Friday. Be sure to tune in tomorrow. We're going to discuss all the evidence found so far. Come here, you. Okay? Yes. The two of us are going to help upload this evidence, and we need you to tune in tomorrow to see who committed the crime and finally solve the mystery of the missing shuttle. Thanks for tuning in. See you tomorrow.
Alrighty. So we'll check that out next time as well. All right. So again, if you were in the classroom, we would have had it set up with microscopes and different fibers for you to look at under the microscopes, so that was as close as I could get to for that. I do want you to look up two of the things that two of the people, one they didn't mention, one she mentioned was Casey Anthony. So I'm going to put that as a assignment in, I'm gonna stop sharing for a minute and put that as an assignment. But Casey Anthony and Wayne Williams. Wayne Williams was a person who was arrested in Atlanta, and his case was based on fiber evidence. So I want you to look those two people up. Casey Anthony, that's the one she mentioned in the video earlier, and Wayne Williams, and talk about the difference, how they use trace evidence in their cases. I'm gonna actually type that into an assignment folder right now. Casey Anthony and Wayne Williams. Casey Anthony was a lady in Florida. Wayne Williams in Atlanta. Very, very famous cases, those two. Mm-hmm. Okay. So I now have it formally in your on your desktop as a Dropbox assignment. So if you look at, it'll say fiber analysis. It is on your home page. And again, these were two very famous cases. Wayne Williams, again, was in Atlanta, and Casey Anthony was from Florida. And how was, so your question that you want to look up, what was the crime and how did the fiber evidence either help convict them or exonerate them? All right, so hopefully most of you finished with the other assignments so you can get started on this one. Right, and again, keep in mind the school does have, and I'm going to put it in the module eventually, uh, AI rules. There's new AI rules about what you can and cannot do. So definitely, if you're trying to use an AI engine, put it in your own words because it'll, if you look up who each of these people are, don't just copy and paste the whole paragraph in. You answer the specific questions. How was fiber evidence used in their case? What was their crime? So you want there's at least 2 sentences for each person. What was their crime? And how was fiber evidence used um, in their case? Again, please use class time to do classwork. So this is a research question. Everybody should be researching. Who are these people? Actually, add in I should add that to the description. Add in the date of the crime. When I say what was the crime? Put in the date and location. Let me add that. Give a good description of what was the crime. What year? And what are they accused of? And what did fiber analysis have to do with solving that case? Let me tweak that assignment just a little more. All right, so if you started already, make sure when I say what was the crime, so do the who, what, where. When, so who, what, where, when. Just gonna put that on there. So who is Wayne Williams? What was the crime? Where was the crime? When did it happen? Who is Casey Anthony? What was her crime? Where did it happen? Where and when did it happen? Okay, what was the crime? The who are these two people. So it's who, what, where, when. And how did they trace fiber evidence? How was fiber evidence involved in solving their case? No problem. All right, so we got about a minute left to class. Hopefully everybody got a good start on that. So when you come in Tuesday, make sure that you start on that, finish it, and then we'll move on. Okay, and this is really a short assignment, not real intense. So again, make sure you look at the question is, who was Wayne Williams? What was his crime? When did it happen? Where did it happen? And then how is fiber analysis connected to solving his case? Second question is, who is Casey Anthony? What was her crime? Where and when? And how was fiber analysis used to solve her case? Okay, so that's 2 paragraphs, 2 separate paragraphs, 10 points. All right, that being said, y'all have a great weekend. When you're ready, you may log out and see you next week. Have a good one.